It just is such a fun collection of different stories. And yeah, it was, and talking to James about it was kind of interesting because, and I think I included this in the story. After that, there's like a ladybug that landed on him like a week later. And I can't remember what teammate it was, but a teammate said to him, "Man, what's going to land you next? Because it seems to be luck for you." So yeah, it was just a cool thing to be able to write and kind of lighthearted and fun way to start the internship.
You're right. I had forgotten that was the home opener. So I would say that was probably a harbinger of the season to come for the Twins, was the Eagle going awry and almost killing a player. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was certainly quite a start you don't see very often.
And look what's happened since then to the Twins, right? So
exactly.
So then, how do you approach a story, or I guess, you wrote a story about both Jake Cave and Max Kepler homering in front of their parents. Is that one that you've got sort of a lot of different elements with, the family element and traveling and up to the majors in Cave's case and things like that, where the story is sort of there, and how do you approach that one? Because it would seem like there's some pretty obvious storylines, but how do you sort of weave that one through?
I think the thing for me, and it became a running joke this summer, that I'm guaranteed to talk to someone's parents if they do something well. But your parents probably know you better than anyone else. And for me, I love to talk to parents, not to ask them like, how good is your son or how good is your daughter?
Sure.
Because they're going to, of course, say nice things unless they're harsh parents. But for me, your parents have the most anecdotes and stories about you. And so I love to talk to parents because they can give context and stories that maybe no one else can. Mm-hmm. And so if they see a look that maybe their son or daughter has in their face, they'll say, "Oh, this is what they're thinking," or "This is what they did." There's some backstory to this, and so for me, it just happened to work out that their parents were there. And for the Cave story, it's his major league debut.
Yeah,
and his parents had to go through this crazy, like 12, 15 hours to be able to get there from Virginia and Florida, and so it was just such a fun story that I think it was during like the 8th inning, I figured out where his parents were sitting, and I ran down to them and just said, "Hey, I'm Nick Kelly with The Athletic. I'd love to talk to you about what the last day's been like." Mm-hmm. And I just asked them about their story, and they just told me their story, and it was a lot of fun. And that's the thing for me, is I just love good stories, and those certainly were good ones, and they have plenty of stories and things to tell you.
That's cool. How are the Twins to work with from a media perspective?
Oh, I will say I'm a little biased because Dustin Morse, their PR chief, he is a fellow Lakeville resident.
Oh, okay.
But no, he was great. The Twins were great to work with, and I mean, I'll admit I haven't covered a lot of Major League Baseball, so I don't necessarily have something to compare it to. But each time Dustin had mentioned where the parents were sitting, and had put me in touch with them, and so yeah, they were great to work with. But again, I am a little biased.
Well, that's fair though. I mean, that's cool. All right. Okay, so now from maybe too much storyline to I don't know how you approach this one. You got sent out to cover an ultimate. I mean, when you read about getting sent out to cover an ultimate frisbee team, I kind of conjures up Veronica Corningstone getting sent to cover, whatever it was, like the cat pageant or whatever it was at the beginning of Anchorman. But you wrote a good story here, right? It's an interesting, compelling read. Tell me about that. I mean, how did that assignment come down the pike? What was it like connecting with those guys? And then once you got there, how long did it take you to realize that this is actually gold and you had the opportunity here to tell a really fun or create a really fun read?
Well, first off, thank you. I appreciate the kind words. I'm glad you enjoyed it. But yeah, I think it was very, as far as stories I've written, is probably one of the most interesting. For me, I didn't play a lot of sports. I played football. I played a little baseball through middle school. Other than that, I didn't play a lot of sports. So for me, most of the sports I write about, I'm learning as I write about them. Or I'm, I've watched and so learned kind of that way. But I really try to be a student of whatever I am covering. So I don't pretend to be an expert. Or maybe the better way to phrase it is, I don't pretend to be deeply analytically minded. So I really try to learn sports and really try to figure out what the sport is. Well, of course, I don't know much about Ultimate going into this, and we had talked to some of their people and leading up to it, and I was genuinely interested. I mean, yes, it's not obviously a sport like a football or baseball, but I'm curious about what exactly this sport is, and I think that's what you really have to have as journalists to be able to succeed in this field. And again, I'm only a couple of years into journalism, but I've really found that the best way to go about it is just being genuinely curious and about why this is something that these people are super passionate about, why this is something that a lot of people play. And I didn't know what they made or what they got from it, before I went into it, but I couldn't imagine it'd be a lot. So I was just really curious as to what this sport and what this team was all about. And I just like to experience things. I mean, that's the biggest thing is that for me, when we thought about, okay, how do we write a story about them? Like, well, they're going to Madison. Like, that'd be kind of fun to go on a trip to Madison. And I've actually never been to Madison. So this was a free ticket for me to see Madison, Wisconsin. But yeah. And I just basically, it was something where I wanted to see, okay, so what is the sport about? But then also I ended up really trying to, my goal going into it, because I think we got there at like 8 a.m. We left from, forgetting what city it was, a little north of Minneapolis. But anyways, we left at 8 a.m. We got back at about, I think, 2 or 3 a.m. And yeah, why do you guys do this? This is something that people see as a dog toy, and they say that. Yeah, I mean, they admit that. They know that. And I think it was such a cool story because most of their parents don't even get what they do.
That's awesome.
But yet they still take time out of their days, drive hours upon hours. There was a guy who came up from Louisiana to go play Ultimate Frisbee. Wow. I mean, there's a guy who's a choir teacher in Iowa who drove a couple hours just to play Ultimate. And to me, it just was unbelievable. And that's what's so cool is a lot of times when you're in sports, you see plenty of people who are they aren't maybe as passionate about their sport. They don't, they're maybe in it because of love of it, but not like these guys are. I mean, they are so passionate and they are so into it that it's a really awesome thing and just such a pure sports environment because they're getting nothing from it. I mean, they're probably losing money by doing this.
Right.
And these guys are, in their 20s and early 30s, and they're doing this. And I just thought it was so cool and so refreshing to see a bunch of people coming together to play a sport just because they love it.
That's awesome. And at a professional level. I mean, it's right. Professional is professional. That's the fact that there's a league, the fact is there's a league, right? That's the bottom line.
Right.
Which is awesome. All right. So that's pretty cool. And I think that curiosity of yours and openness and willingness to experience it came through in the story, right? Whereas, like I said, I mean, my first reaction was kind of like, I don't know if I need to read this. But by the time I got to reading it, it was kind of interesting, And like I said, I think that a lot of that probably has to do with your attitude as you approached it.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. I think there's someone early on who told me that if you're bored writing it, they're going to be bored reading it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I try not to write things that I would be bored reading. Yeah.
Which does give me anyway, respect for the Dan Hayeses of the world. Baseball beat writers, especially in a losing season, talk about if you're bored writing it. I mean, their ability to continue to do their job every day is pretty impressive.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I have so much respect for Dan Hayes and anyone else who covers baseball, especially when the team's not doing well. And even when the team is doing well, there's so many games that it's just,
yeah.
You have to get creative and you have to find unique story angles. And Dan does a great job of it from what I've seen. So it's a grind.
For sure. All right. So from the let's head over to the Sublime side of things. Tell me about talking to Jimmy Larson for that story, because obviously, that's one where it's very easy for the reader to get invested emotionally, but you still have to present it in a way that's not, overly gratuitous or anything like that, which I felt like you did as well. But what was that experience like?
Well, Nick, I know you don't have a journalism background, but you seem to have actually a pretty good approach to all this. You've got it figured out. Yeah, I think the thing with a story like that, and you alluded to it, really, you kind of want to stay out of the way. Because for me, a story like that, it's just an honor to be able to tell a story like that. It's just something where you feel fortunate that someone trusted their story in you to tell that, because this isn't just another day at the ballpark kind of thing.
Yep.
And it's something where you really just want to make sure you do the story justice. I mean, that's honestly the biggest worry of mine. I think it is for anyone who tells a story like that, any journalist. You just want to make sure that you do the story what it needs to have done to it, basically. You want to make sure you tell the story right. And it was just something where I try to use a layout process when I write my longer stories, and I had to use a different kind of formatting of my layout and changing things up just because I had never written anything like it before, and I want to do justice.
Well, I mean, it didn't come across as formulaic in the least. Not that you were suggesting it would have, but yeah, no, it was. Thank you. Those reads, I mean, those are good reads, right? I mean, because like I said, it's you've got a pretty strong hook for the reader, but then fleshing it out, it's all, those are tough, good reads, but in this case, a happy ending, at least at this point. All right, so one more story I want to get the backdrop on from you that you wrote, and maybe and strong here is, how do you write a story about a dude playing video games for 24 hours?
That is a good question. I don't know if I did it well. I tried my best, but yeah, I think it's something, again, where I was just genuinely curious. I don't think I could do that. And I'm also curious because I don't think I would survive that or have the willpower to make it through 24 hours of it.
Right, exactly.
And so it's so much of what we do, there's a lot of different ways to ask it, but the core question is why? And it's not saying, like, oh, you're dumb for doing this or thinking this. It's just genuinely asking, why did you do this? Why do you think this? Why is this important to you? And that's the biggest thing, is I just wanted to find out, okay, JT Brown is not going to just go play video games for 24 hours straight just to play video games for 24 hours straight. There's a why behind this. So it's my job to go figure that out. And so I wanted to take viewers, or readers, I should say, through kind of what his 24 hours are kind of like, and the different elements of the 24 hours. And so his brother is a big part of his life, and video games were important to him and helped them stay connected. And so when his brother was, I talked about his brother to be able to bring in the fact that video games have been important to JT, and they're not just something that maybe someone sees as a waste of time. They were literally and legitimately something that kept them connected. And so it's just using basically different parts of the night where the baby was crying, or where his wife was tweeting at him to keep it down, using that kind of to drive the story of this is why it's important to him.
Yeah.
Does that kind of answer your
Absolutely.
question?
Yeah, no, no, definitely. That's cool. No, that's interesting. All right. Well, I mean, looking just on those handful alone, I mean, hopefully they're representative of what you feel was the overall body of work for the summer, but it had to have been a pretty fun summer. So as you look back on it now with a few days of separation, but only a few days of separation, what's one or two things that stick out for you that you hope that you'll remember most down the road from this experience? I
mean, it is cliche to say it, but really the people. I mean, it was such a great group of people to work with. I mean, from Zach Pierce, our fearless managing editor, to the contributors, to the staff writers. I mean, it's just a group that it's really fun to be a part of, something that is new and is a startup, and something that you're all working towards something, and you're all supporting each other, trying to help each other. Because I feel like newspapers, I mean, people are very supportive in the industry as a whole. But when you have these long established newspapers, you don't feel ownership of it as much. of the overall success of it long term? Maybe because you weren't maybe there from the start of it. That'd be pretty hard to be there